Tonight, the Supreme Court faces a defining question, one that could reshape the boundaries of American liberty. Can the government strip you of your Second Amendment right to own a gun simply because you use drugs, even marijuana, which is now legal in many states? This case isn't just about guns or drugs, it's about the intersection of personal freedom, evolving social norms, and the power of the federal government. The Department of Justice is fighting to uphold a federal law that says yes, arguing that drug use and gun ownership are a dangerous mix. Their stance has ignited a national debate, pitting liberty against safety, and raising questions about how our laws should adapt as attitudes toward drugs, like marijuana, change. As more states legalize marijuana, millions of Americans could unknowingly become federal criminals for simply owning firearms while using a substance that's legal in their state. This legal gray area leaves many confused and anxious, unsure if their rights are at risk. The outcome of this case will set a powerful precedent, shaping the future of gun rights and drug policy for generations to come. It will influence not just what laws say, but how they are enforced and understood across the country. Gun rights advocates argue passionately that private lifestyle choices, like using marijuana, shouldn't erase fundamental constitutional rights without clear evidence of danger. They warn that allowing the government to decide who is fit to own a gun based on personal habits could set a troubling precedent for other rights as well. The government counters that mixing drugs and guns is a recipe for disaster, and that the law is a necessary safeguard to protect public safety. They point to studies linking substance abuse to increased risk of violence and accidents, insisting that some restrictions are essential. The world is watching closely as America grapples with how to balance individual freedom and public order. Other countries look to the US as a model, and the decision here could influence global debates on rights and regulation. The stakes are high. Where does personal freedom end and public safety begin? This case forces the nation to confront difficult questions about risk, responsibility, and the true meaning of constitutional rights in a changing society. The Supreme Court's answer will not only shape gun rights, but also reflect the nation's character and its ongoing commitment to constitutional principles. The decision will echo through courts, legislatures, and communities for years to come. Tonight, the nation holds its breath as the justices prepare to draw a new line in the sand, one that will define the balance between freedom and safety for a new era. To truly understand today's battle over gun rights and regulation, we must look back through the lens of history. The story of disarmament in America is long and complex, shaped by shifting fears, evolving laws, and the ever-present tension between individual liberty and public safety. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms, a principle deeply woven into the nation's fabric. Yet, this right has never been absolute. From the very beginning, lawmakers and courts have debated its limits, balancing freedom with the need for order. Historically, laws often targeted groups seen as threats to public order, sometimes based on loyalty, responsibility, or perceived danger. Disarmament wasn't just about crime, it was about who was trusted with power and who was not. The law at the heart of this case, 18 U.S.C. § 922G3, makes it a felony for unlawful drug users to possess firearms. This statute is just one chapter in a much larger story of federal gun regulation. Passed in 1968, in the wake of high-profile assassinations and social unrest, the Gun Control Act aimed to curb gun violence by restricting access for felons, the mentally ill, and drug users. It was a response to a nation in crisis, seeking to restore a sense of safety. For decades, this law was seen as a reasonable safety measure, widely accepted as a way to keep firearms out of the hands of those considered dangerous or impaired. The logic was simple. Drug users may have impaired judgment, making gun ownership risky not just for themselves, but for their families and communities. Lawmakers believed this restriction would prevent tragedies before they could occur. But recent Supreme Court rulings have changed the landscape. Now the government must do more than argue sensibility. It must prove that such laws fit within America's historical tradition of firearm regulation, as understood by the founders. The 1968 ban is under new scrutiny, with courts and the public questioning whether it truly aligns with the nation's legal heritage. The question is no longer just about what seems sensible or effective, but about what is rooted in historical precedent. Did early American lawmakers envision such restrictions? Does this law have roots in the 18th or 19th centuries, or is it a modern invention? The answer could determine the future of gun regulation in the United States. The stakes are high. The answer could reshape federal gun policy for generations to come, redefining the balance between rights and regulation in America. This legal firestorm began with one man, Ali Hemani, an ordinary resident of Texas whose case would soon capture national attention and ignite a fierce debate about constitutional rights and public safety. Hemani was a small business owner, known in his community, and a regular marijuana user. Like many Americans, he also legally owned a firearm for personal protection and peace of mind. But everything changed when Hemani was indicted under a federal law that bans anyone who uses illegal drugs from possessing guns, a law that has been on the books for decades. Suddenly facing the very real threat of prison time, Hemani decided to fight back. He argued that this law violated his Second Amendment rights, the very rights enshrined in the Constitution to protect citizens. His legal team made a bold claim that using marijuana, which is now legal in many states, should not strip someone of their fundamental right to bear arms, especially when no violent crime was involved. They argued that the law unfairly punishes people for their status as drug users, rather than for any dangerous or criminal actions they might commit. In a landmark and closely watched decision, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with Hemani. The judges found no historical precedent for disarming people solely because they use drugs, especially when those drugs are legal in many states. The court ruled that, as applied to Hemani, the federal ban was unconstitutional. This decision sent shockwaves through the legal world and set the stage for a dramatic Supreme Court showdown. The Department of Justice quickly appealed the ruling, warning that it could undermine public safety and make it harder to keep firearms out of the hands of those who might be impaired or dangerous. The government insists that the ban is a crucial tool for law enforcement designed to prevent potentially risky individuals from accessing deadly weapons. Now the Supreme Court faces a pivotal decision. Is this law a necessary safeguard for society, or does it represent an unconstitutional overreach that infringes on individual rights? The answer could reshape decades of federal gun enforcement policy and redefine the balance between public safety and constitutional freedoms. With so much at stake, the nation watches closely. The stakes have never been higher. The Department of Justice is making its case. Banning drug users from owning guns is essential for public safety. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar argues that mixing illegal drugs and firearms creates a high risk of violence. The government points to a tradition of disarming those deemed dangerous or irresponsible. They warn that striking down the law would let users of fentanyl, heroin, and meth legally own guns. The DOJ frames the law as a preventative measure, separating weapons from those whose drug use makes them unpredictable. This isn't a blanket ban, they argue, but a targeted limit on the Second Amendment. The Biden administration defends the law as a life-saving tool. The government asks the court to affirm that the right to bear arms is not unlimited. The outcome will define the boundaries of gun rights in America. The Supreme Court must apply a historical test to a modern dilemma. The 2022 Bruin decision said a new standard gun laws must align with the nation's historical tradition. The government must show that similar restrictions existed in the 18th or 19th centuries. Hemani's lawyers argue there's no precedent for a blanket ban based on drug use alone. The government counters that laws once disarmed the unvirtuous or intoxicated. The stakes are huge. A ruling against the ban could spark challenges to other gun laws, from age limits to weapon bans. The firearms industry and political world are watching closely. A decision could energize gun rights advocates or reinforce federal regulation. Socially, the ruling will deepen America's divide over guns. The court's decision will echo far beyond the courtroom. The future of gun regulation hangs in the balance. Marijuana legalization complicates everything. 38 states allow medical marijuana, 24 permit recreational use. Millions legally use cannabis under state law, but remain federal criminals if they own guns. This marijuana paradox is central to the Hemani case. His lawyers argue it's irrational to disarm people for conduct legal in their communities. Over 50 million Americans use marijuana, 81 million own guns, many overlap. Upholding the ban forces people to choose between treatment and gun rights. The Supreme Court's decision could pressure Congress to update federal drug laws. If the ban stands, federal law trumps state legalization, leaving millions in limbo. The case exposes a growing rift between federal policy and state realities. This law isn't just theoretical, it made headlines with Hunter Biden. President Biden's son was indicted for buying a gun while addicted to drugs, highlighting the law's reach. His prosecution showed the law applies to everyone, regardless of status. Hunter Biden's case ended with a plea deal and presidential pardon, but it spotlighted the law's severe consequences. The story made the debate real for many Americans. It showed the law targets not just traffickers, but anyone struggling with addiction. The case adds political complexity to the Supreme Court's deliberations. Legal experts are divided on history's lessons. Gun rights advocates argue that historical laws targeted dangerous conduct, not mere status as a user. They say the founders didn't disarm people for personal habits, only for proven threats. The current law, they argue, is a modern invention, not rooted in the Second Amendment's principles. Government supporters counter that history allowed disarming those deemed irresponsible or dangerous. They argue the tradition is flexible enough to include today's habitual drug users. The real question, should the court demand a perfect historical match or focus on core principles? Both sides warn that the wrong answer could cripple the government's ability to address modern threats or erode fundamental rights. The justices must weigh these competing visions to decide the law's fate. The Supreme Court's decision will be a turning point for the Second Amendment. A ruling for the government cements its power to bar unlawful drug users from owning guns. A win for Hemani could topple a 50-year-old law and challenge other restrictions not tied to violence. The case is about more than guns and drugs. It's about the balance between freedom and security. Should rights be restricted based on status, or only after proven danger? The ruling will shape the next chapter in America's gun debate. Sommendaker, Dakardine, Drnaker Naktaran, Wen Newmine Onedzokur. Court sets the precedent, but the people will decide what comes next. The nation's future hangs in the balance.